The city woke up the same way it always did, loud, rushed, and uncaring. Cars filled the streets with endless noise. Horns blared. Footsteps hurried past one another on cracked sidewalks. People stared at their phones, their watches, their reflections in shop windows. Everyone was busy chasing something: money, time, success. Yet no one seemed to notice what lay right in front of them. On the corners of this busy world lived another reality. Under broken streetlights and beside closed shops, people slept on cold concrete. Thin blankets, torn cardboard, and old bags were all they had to protect them from the night. Their faces carried stories no one asked to hear, stories of loss, hunger, and forgotten dreams. The city saw them, but it did not see them. Some people walked faster when they passed by. Others looked away, pretending not to notice. A few whispered judgments under their breath. To most, the homeless were just part of the background, as ordinary and ignored as a cracked wall or a broken sign. This was a world where suffering blended into the noise. Among those forgotten souls was a young girl, barely more than a shadow against the concrete. Her clothes were worn thin. Her shoes had holes that let the cold bite into her feet. Her face was tired beyond her years, marked by quiet pain and silent strength. She had learned an important rule of the streets: do not expect help. People passed her every day, and not once did they stop. Not when she was hungry, not when she was sick, not when the nights grew colder and fear wrapped around her like a second skin. The city had taught her that kindness was rare and often dangerous. Yet, despite everything, something inside her had not hardened. Somewhere deep in her heart lived a small, stubborn spark, a belief she barely understood herself, a belief that people still mattered, even when the world said they didn't. Around her, life rushed on without pause. A businessman stepped over a sleeping body without slowing down. A woman clutched her purse tighter and crossed the street. A group laughed loudly as they passed, never noticing the quiet misery beside them. No one asked names. No one asked stories. And fate waited patiently, because sometimes the biggest changes begin with the smallest moments. Sometimes, in a world that looks away, one pair of eyes finally chooses to see. The girl didn't know it yet, but this city, so cold, so cruel, was standing on the edge of something unexpected. One decision, made by someone with nothing to lose, was about to break through the noise. And when it did, it would remind the world of something it had forgotten. That compassion still exists, that lives still matter, and that even the most invisible person can change destiny forever. The stage was set. The moment was coming. The girl was no more than 17, though the streets had aged her far beyond her years. Her body was thin, her shoulders always slightly bent, as if she carried an invisible weight. Dirt clung to her worn clothes, and her hands were rough from nights spent sleeping on concrete and days spent searching through trash for anything useful. Her hair, once long and full, was now tied back with a torn ribbon she had found on the road. Her eyes told the real story. They were dark and deep, filled with a sadness that had settled there long ago. But hidden behind that sadness was something rare: awareness. She watched everything, every passing face, every sudden movement. On the streets, being alert meant staying alive. She had not always lived this way. Once, she had a small home with cracked walls and a leaking roof, but it was warm. Once, she had a mother whose voice could calm any fear. Her father had been gone early in her life, and when her mother fell sick, the world began to fall apart. Hospital bills grew. Neighbors turned distant. Promises of help were spoken and forgotten. Then came the betrayal. Relatives who swore they would protect her took what little remained and sent her away. No would-be, no explanation, just closed doors and cold faces. At 14, she learned the cruel truth that even family can abandon you when you become a burden. The streets became her home. Every day was a battle. Hunger twisted her stomach until it hurt to breathe. Sometimes she went 2 days without food, surviving on water and the hope that someone might leave leftovers behind. Fear followed her everywhere. Fear of strangers, fear of the dark, fear of not waking up at all. Humiliation hurt the most. People spoke about her as if she weren't there. Some laughed. Others pointed. A few treated her like dirt beneath their shoes. She learned to keep her head down, to disappear into the background. It was safer that way. And yet, something inside her refused to break. At night, when the city grew quiet, she looked up at the sky between tall buildings and whispered dreams she was afraid to believe in. She dreamed of safety, of a place where she could sleep without fear, of being seen, not as a problem, but as a person. Despite everything the world had taken from her, her heart still knew right from wrong. She shared food when she had it. She warned others when danger was near. She helped newcomers learn how to survive. Kindness was her shield, even when it cost her, even when she had nothing left to give. She did not help because she expected anything in return. She helped because she understood pain, because she knew what it felt like to be ignored, forgotten, and left behind. The streets had taken her home, her family, and her childhood, but they had not taken her humanity. As she curled up against a cold wall that evening, pulling her thin jacket closer, she had no idea that her kindness, quiet, unnoticed, and uncelebrated, was about to place her in the path of destiny. And soon, she would face a choice that would change everything. He lay where the city had forgotten him, behind a row of old buildings, near an alley that smelled of rust and rainwater. A man had collapsed against the cold pavement. His body was still, except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. One arm was stretched out, his fingers curled as if he had reached for help that never came. His face was pale, almost gray. Sweat covered his forehead, and his lips were dry and cracked. Each breath came slowly, painfully, like his lungs were fighting to keep working. Whatever had brought him here, it had brought him close to the end. Time was running out. His clothes were neat, but now wrinkled and stained. They did not belong to the streets. Yet he lay there as helpless as anyone who had nothing. A silver watch hung loose on his wrist, scratched and dull. It was the only hint that this man was not what he appeared to be. In his fading mind, memories drifted in and out. Flashes of tall buildings, quiet offices, and long nights filled with work. Faces he could no longer name. Promises he had broken. Words he had meant to say, but never did. His life had been full of success and empty of warmth, though he had not understood that until now. Pain surged through his chest, sharp and unforgiving. He tried to move. His body refused. Footsteps echoed nearby. Voices passed close enough that he could hear laughter and conversation. Someone glanced down the alley, paused for a second, then looked away. To them, he was just another problem. Another drunk. Another homeless man who had made bad choices. No one stopped. A man stepped around him, careful not to touch. A woman pulled her coat tighter and hurried past. Someone shook their head and muttered words filled with judgment, not concern. The city had decided his story wasn't worth hearing. His vision blurred. The sound around him grew distant, like he was sinking underwater. The cold crept into his bones, and fear tightened its grip around his heart. He did not want to die here, alone and unseen. But the world kept moving. Cars roared in the distance. A siren wailed far away, too far to help. The sky above the narrow alley darkened as evening approached, stealing what little warmth remained. With each passing minute, his breaths became weaker. The city had turned its back on him, and as his strength faded, fate stood quietly nearby, waiting for the one person who would not walk away. The moment was close. The girl was walking slowly that evening, her steps careful as the cold crept deeper into the city. She was searching for a safe corner to rest before night fully fell. The alley was not part of her plan. She avoided dark places whenever she could. Too many bad memories lived there. Then she saw him. At first, she thought it was just another body. Someone sleeping. Someone drunk. The city was full of people lying on the ground, and stopping every time was dangerous. Her heart told her to keep walking, but something felt wrong. She slowed her steps and looked again. The man's chest moved, but barely. His face was pale, his skin damp with sweat. One arm lay stretched toward the open space, as if he had reached out and failed. Fear rushed through her. Her first thought was to run. Helping strangers had brought her trouble before. People blamed her. Guards chased her away. Sometimes, those she tried to help turned cruel. On the streets, kindness often came with a price. She stood frozen, torn between instinct and conscience. If she stayed, she could get hurt. Someone might accuse her of stealing. Someone might push her away. She could lose her sleeping place for the night. She could even lose her life. Her stomach twisted with hunger. Her legs ached. She had nothing to spare. And yet, she couldn't move. She remembered her mother's face from long ago. The gentle way she had spoken about doing what was right, even when it was hard. She remembered the pain of being left alone, wishing someone would care. The man made a weak sound, a breath that barely escaped his lips. That sound broke her hesitation. She knelt beside him, her hands shaking. Up close, she could see how bad it was. His breathing was shallow. His skin was cold. She pressed her ear close to his chest, counting each fragile breath like it might be the last. Panic rose in her chest. She looked around the alley, hoping someone else might help. But it was empty. The city had already made its choice. So she made hers. She stood and ran to the street, waving her arms, calling out for help. People stared. Some slowed down, then kept walking. Others shook their heads and moved away. No one stopped. Her throat burned as she ran back. She used what little strength she had to drag him away from the cold wall, propping him up so he could breathe better. She took off her thin jacket, the only warmth she owned, and placed it over his chest. The cold hit her instantly. Her teeth began to chatter, but she stayed. She searched his pockets, not for money, but for anything that could explain who he was. An ID, a clue, anything. Her hands trembled as she found nothing useful. Time felt heavy. Every second mattered. She finally ran again, farther this time, until her lungs burned. She begged. She pleaded. She refused to be ignored. At last, someone called for help. When the sound of distant sirens reached her ears, relief washed over her like warm light. She sank to the ground, exhausted, cold, and scared, but she had not walked away. As the man was taken from the alley, she stepped back into the shadows, unnoticed and unnamed. No one thanked her. No one asked who she was. But the choice she made, at great cost to herself, had already changed everything. And though she didn't know it yet, the life she saved would soon return to change hers forever. The city returned to its rhythm the very next morning, as if nothing unusual had happened. The alley was empty again. No sign of the man. No sign of the sirens. Only the cold ground and the marks of where someone had once lain between life and death. To the city, it was just another night erased. For the girl, it was not so easy to forget. She woke up shivering beneath a bridge, her body aching from the cold she had taken on the night before. The thin jacket she had given away was gone forever. Without it, the morning air felt sharper, crueler. Her fingers were stiff, and her head throbbed from exhaustion and hunger. Helping him had cost her more than she expected. Later that day, she returned to her usual corner near the closed shops. It was the closest thing she had to shelter. But before she could sit, a harsh voice shouted at her to move. Someone had complained. Someone always did. She tried to explain, but no one listened. She was pushed away. With nowhere else to go, she walked the streets until her legs burned. Hunger twisted her stomach, but she had no energy left to search for food. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the man in the alley. Did he live? Did anyone care? No one had thanked her. No one had asked her name. To the people who arrived after the sirens, she was invisible again. Just another homeless girl standing too close. By nightfall, her fever began. Her body shook as she curled up behind a trash bin, using cardboard to block the wind. Every breath felt heavy. The cold she had taken on the night before now wrapped around her chest like a tight rope. For the first time, doubt crept into her heart. She stared at the dark sky and wondered if kindness was foolish, if helping others only led to pain. The world had taken so much from her already, her home, her family, her safety, and now it had taken her strength. Tears slid quietly down her face, not from fear, but from disappointment. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? Then why did it hurt so much? Around her, people laughed as they passed. Cars drove by warm and full. Life continued, untouched by her sacrifice. She closed her eyes, whispering words she wasn't sure anyone could hear. A simple wish. Not for reward, not for riches, just for the belief that her kindness had mattered. The city did not answer, but somewhere far away, a life was beating because of her. And though she could not see it yet, the price she paid in silence was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Light was the first thing he noticed. Not the harsh light of the city, but a soft glow that made him blink and turn his head away. The smell of clean sheets and medicine filled the air. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then pain spread through his chest, deep and heavy, reminding him that he was alive. Barely. His eyes opened slowly. White walls, quiet machines humming beside him. A steady beeping sound marked each heartbeat, strong enough to be heard, fragile enough to be feared. Confusion wrapped around his thoughts. He tried to remember how he got here, but his mind gave him only broken pieces. A dark alley, cold ground, a face bending over him, eyes full of worry. Then nothing. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. The doctor said later that he was lucky, that a few more minutes, and he would not have made it, that someone had acted in time. Someone had refused to walk away. Those words stayed with him. As days passed, strength slowly returned to his body. His hands no longer shook. His breathing became easier, but his thoughts were restless. He replayed the moments before everything went dark, searching for meaning in the blur. Why had he been alone? Why had no one helped, except one? Small details began to surface. The clean clothes that replaced his stained ones. The private room. The quiet respect in the way staff spoke to him. Papers were signed, calls were made, and things happened without him asking. This was not the life of a forgotten man. Yet, lying in that bed, stripped of control and strength, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Real fear. Not of loss, but of ending without being known. Of dying unnoticed, like so many others he had passed by without a second thought. For the first time in years, he faced his own weakness. He realized how close he had come to disappearing, not because he lacked money or power, but because he had been human, fragile, mortal, and someone with nothing, had saved him. That truth pressed heavily on his heart. He began to ask questions about the alley, about who had found him, about the girl whose face he could not forget. Each answer was unclear, incomplete, but the seed had been planted, a seed of gratitude, a seed of guilt, a seed of change. The man who should have died was waking up to a life he no longer wanted to live the same way. And deep inside him, a quiet promise began to form. The truth did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, piece by piece, like light slipping through a crack in a closed door. As the man grew stronger, the room around him began to change. Nurses spoke with careful respect. Doctors checked on him more often than necessary. Important-looking visitors came and went, lowering their voices when they spoke near his bed. Phones hung. Papers were signed. Decisions were made. And slowly, the mask fell away. He was not an ordinary man. Beyond the hospital walls, his name carried weight. He owned companies that stretched across cities and countries. His decisions shaped markets. His signature moved millions. People feared disappointing him and rushed to please him. He was a billionaire. Yet lying in that hospital bed, none of that had mattered. In the quiet hours of recovery, memories returned more clearly. Long nights in tall glass buildings, meetings that never ended, a life measured in profits and power. He had chased success with everything he had, believing it would fill the emptiness inside him. It never did. His marriage had collapsed under the weight of absence. His friendships faded as work took priority. Family became distant voices he promised to call someday, and someday never came. He had been surrounded by people, and completely alone. The near-death experience shattered that illusion. He remembered the alley now, the cold ground, the fear that had gripped him when his body failed. He remembered how no one stopped, how easily his life could have ended without a single name spoken, without a single tear shed. For the first time, his wealth felt small. Guilt settled heavily on his chest. How many people had he ignored? How many lives had he passed by without seeing? How close had he come to dying just like them? Then there was her, the girl. She had nothing, no power, no protection, and yet she had chosen to stop, to risk herself for a stranger, to give warmth when she barely had enough to survive. That truth cut deeper than any pain. Her act of kindness stood in sharp contrast to his former life. She had given without expecting anything. He had taken without noticing who he left behind. The world he believed in no longer made sense. Lying awake at night, he stared at the ceiling and felt something new grow inside him. Not fear, not pride, responsibility. He realized that surviving was not enough. Being saved carried meaning. It demanded change. For the first time in his life, he did not think about profit or image. He thought about impact, about lives that slipped through cracks, about the invisible people the world chose not to see, and about the girl who had refused to look away. Her single act of compassion had done what wealth never could. It had opened his eyes. The man who once believed power defined worth was gone. In his place stood someone awakening to a deeper truth. That real value lies in kindness. And real success is measured by how many lives you lift, not how high you climb. The truth was now clear, and it was about to change everything he did next. The moment he was strong enough to sit up on his own, his thoughts turned to her. The girl. Her face haunted him, not with fear, but with quiet courage. He could not remember her clearly, only the feeling she left behind. Warmth in a moment of cold, care in a world that had turned away. He needed to find her. As soon as he left the hospital, he began asking questions. He spoke to doctors, nurses, and security staff. He visited the alley where he had collapsed, standing there in silence, trying to imagine how close he had come to dying. No one knew her name. Some said a homeless girl had been seen that night. Others said she had run away before help arrived. A few shook their heads, saying there were many girls like that. Too many to count. The streets offered no clear answers. He hired people to search, but even money struggled against invisibility. The homeless left no addresses, no records, no fixed places. They moved constantly, pushed from one corner to the next. Days passed. His frustration grew heavier with each failed lead. Time felt like an enemy. What if she was sick? What if she had disappeared like so many others? The thought tightened his chest. At the same time, the girl's world was growing darker. The cold she had taken on that night had worsened. Fever burned through her body, leaving her weak and dizzy. She struggled to stand. Hunger made her vision blur. Still, she forced herself to move, knowing that stopping could be dangerous. Each day, she drifted farther from the place where she had once slept, chased away again and again. Two lives moving in the same city. So close, yet missing each other. One afternoon, the man visited a crowded shelter after hearing a rumor. He walked through rows of tired faces, searching for eyes he hoped to recognize. But she was not there. That same evening, the girl passed near the building where he stood moments earlier. She paused outside, drawn by warmth and light, then turned away, afraid of being pushed out again. Fate teased them both. Night after night, he lay awake, feeling the weight of failure. He had survived because of her, yet he could not reach her. For the first time, he felt powerless. Not because he lacked money, but because he could not undo the harm the world had done. The city swallowed people whole. Still, he refused to stop. Every search deepened his resolve. Every closed door strengthened his need to make things right. He knew that finding her was not just about gratitude. It was about justice. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, the girl struggled on, unaware that the man whose life she had saved was now fighting just as hard to save hers. Their paths were circling closer. The moment they met again was coming. The man had searched for weeks, but the search had changed him in ways he had never expected. Sitting in his office that overlooked the city, he stared out at the streets below, watching people move like currents in a river. The thought of the girl, the one who had saved his life, haunted him, not because she needed his help, but because she had reminded him of everything he had forgotten: compassion, humility, the value of life beyond wealth and power. He had money. He had influence. He could have easily tracked her down, offered her shelter, gifts, or security. But something inside him had shifted. Money alone could not repay what she had given him. The gift of life, the gift of seeing the world differently. He wanted his response to matter in the deepest sense, to reflect the transformation that had begun in his heart. He left the office the next morning without his usual entourage. He walked the streets himself, feeling the pavement beneath his polished shoes, smelling the familiar mix of smoke, rain, and food vendors. Everywhere he looked, he saw people he had once ignored. Street vendors hustling under the sun, children playing among trash, the homeless wrapped in tattered blankets. He realized that the world he had controlled from glass towers had never truly been seen. Finally, he found her. She was sleeping under a bridge, thin and frail, coughing into her sleeve. When she looked up, fear flashed in her eyes. Her life had taught her to expect the worst from strangers, even wealthy strangers. But he knelt beside her, not with gifts or money, but with an offer far more unexpected: dignity. He promised her safety, yes, but not charity that demanded gratitude. He promised her choices, respect, and the chance to be seen as a person, not a problem. Then he acted. He used his influence to change the system itself. He funded shelters that treated people like human beings, not numbers. He invested in programs to provide education, healthcare, and opportunity for the forgotten. He implemented reforms that addressed the root causes of homelessness, poverty, and neglect. Every action reflected the lesson the girl had taught him, that real help meant transformation, not temporary fixes. His friends and colleagues were stunned. They expected a large check, a headline, or a personal reward. They did not expect the humility, the care, the understanding that this act was not about them, or even about him. It was about restoring humanity to the world he had overlooked. For the girl, it was surreal. She could not believe that someone so powerful had remembered her, not with wealth, but with heart. She saw in his eyes something new. Remorse for the life he had lived too fast, gratitude for the lesson he had learned, and a deep, unwavering determination to do what was right. The city began to notice the changes. Slowly, compassion began to ripple through the streets. Programs opened. People who had felt invisible found help that honored them. The man's redemption was not just personal. It was public, systemic, lasting. And through it all, he never forgot the moment that started it all. A small girl, with nothing to give but her courage, reaching out when the world had turned its back. In saving him, she had changed the course of many lives. And in choosing to act with intention, he had finally become the man he was meant to be: humble, aware, and transformed. The world had shifted, not because of wealth, not because of power, but because of kindness returned with purpose. The morning sunlight fell softly across the streets, warming corners that had once seemed forever cold. The girl woke to a reality she had never imagined. Her life was beginning to change. At first, she could not believe it. After years of fear and neglect, hope felt strange, almost dangerous. For so long, she had survived on invisibility. People ignored her, treated her like nothing, and she had learned to do the same, to shrink, to disappear, to expect disappointment. Now, someone saw her, not just noticed her presence, but recognized her value. The man who had once been a stranger, who had been saved by her courage, had made it his mission to ensure she would never be invisible again. The first change came quietly. A warm meal in a safe place. Clothes that did not smell of rain or smoke. A bed that did not bite into her skin at night. Each small gift, each act of care felt surreal. She kept expecting the world to take it away, as it always had. But it didn't. It stayed. With every passing day, she felt something stir inside her, a fragile sense of dignity she thought had been lost forever. She walked taller, spoke softer but with confidence, and allowed herself to dream in ways she had long abandoned. The fear of hope lingered, but she let it exist alongside curiosity. Slowly, she began to confront her past. The betrayal of family, the nights spent cold and hungry, the constant judgment from strangers, all of it pressed against her heart. But now, instead of breaking her, the memories became lessons. She realized that her worth had never depended on those who abandoned her. Her courage, her kindness, and her heart had been her strength all along. The girl discovered something remarkable. Being valued changed not only how others saw her, it changed how she saw herself. When people spoke to her with respect, when she was listened to without interruption, she felt a warmth she had thought lost forever. Every smile, every acknowledgement was a reminder that her life mattered. The city around her did not change overnight. There were still dark alleys and cold nights. There were still people who passed by without seeing her. But she had learned that one act of kindness could ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. One act had saved her life, given her hope, and restored her sense of humanity. In the quiet moments, she thought of the man who had refused to let her courage go unnoticed. His choice had sparked a chain of changes, small, steady, transformative. And as she stepped into the streets each day with newfound confidence, she understood the truth he had shown her. Kindness, when returned with purpose, could come full circle. The girl smiled, feeling the weight of years of pain lift just slightly. She was no longer invisible. She was seen. She was valued. And for the first time in her life, she believed that second chances were real and that they were worth embracing. Months passed, and the city seemed unchanged, yet their lives had shifted in ways no money could buy. The man continued to transform. He spent less time in boardrooms and more time walking the streets, meeting people who had once been invisible to him. He listened. He learned. He sacrificed comfort and control, stepping out of the world of power he had once thought defined him. Board meetings were rescheduled, luxury trips postponed. Every choice became deliberate, focused on impact rather than ego. His wealth remained, but it was no longer the measure of his worth. It was the tool to rebuild lives, to give dignity where it had been denied. For the girl, life slowly gained stability. Safe housing replaced cold pavements. Warm meals replaced hunger. She learned to trust herself again, to believe that the world could hold space for someone like her. Therapy sessions, mentoring, and community programs helped her heal the scars that survival had carved into her mind and heart. But the most profound change was internal. She began to see her own value, to recognize that her courage and kindness were not accidents, but gifts. They never sought attention or headlines. Their acts rippled quietly, transforming lives without spectacle. The shelters he funded flourished. Children received education. Families found hope. She volunteered alongside him, guiding newcomers and sharing her story without shame. Together, they created a ripple effect far beyond their own lives. There was no romance, yet a deep bond grew between them. A bond forged through shared purpose, trust, and the unspoken understanding of lives touched by compassion. Love, in its purest form, was expressed through action, through listening, protecting, giving, and acknowledging another person's worth. Each act of kindness became a bridge between them, a testament to the power of empathy over ego. In quiet moments, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A dying man saved by a homeless girl, and a life forever changed by simple courage. They understood that true wealth was measured not in money, but in lives lifted, hearts healed, and hope restored. The city continued its noise and chaos, but in the lives of the man and the girl, there was clarity. They had healed not just themselves, but each other. They had discovered that compassion, once acted upon, could extend far beyond any single moment, transforming the future for countless others. And in that ongoing healing, they found what neither could have bought: a life rich in purpose, connection, and the quiet certainty that kindness, once sown, always returns. Years passed, but the memory of that single night never faded. The alley, the cold, the moment when courage had met desperation, it lingered in both their hearts, shaping everything that came after. The man, once consumed by ambition and self-interest, had transformed into someone whose life was defined by empathy, not wealth. Boardrooms still existed, but they no longer ruled him. Every decision he made, from funding shelters to creating opportunities for the forgotten, carried the imprint of that night, the silent reminder of a girl who had risked everything to save a stranger. The girl, now thriving in ways she had never imagined, often thought back to that night as well. She had learned that her actions, however small they seemed, could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. Her life, once defined by fear and invisibility, had become a source of hope for others. She helped children like herself, guided families lost to hardship, and shared her story quietly, without pride, without expectation. Together, though their paths were different, they left a mark on the city that could not be measured in money or accolades. Every life touched, every heart lifted, every act of kindness inspired by that one moment became part of a living legacy. It was a reminder that true heroism often goes unnoticed, that miracles are rarely loud, and that redemption is always possible when compassion guides the way. They both knew that the world would continue to be harsh, that suffering would never completely disappear. But they also knew this. Even in the darkest corners, one act of courage could illuminate countless lives. One choice to see, to help, to love without expectation could alter destinies forever. As the girl walked through the city streets she had once feared, and the man oversaw programs that changed lives daily, they understood a simple truth. Legacy is not written in wealth, power, or fame. It is written in kindness, in selfless action, and in the quiet courage of those who refuse to look away. And somewhere, in every alley where fear and hopelessness once ruled, their story whispered to others. There are heroes in silence, miracles in small gestures, and hope in the hearts of those who choose compassion over indifference. Their lives had intertwined, not for glory or recognition, but to show the world a lesson too often forgotten, that humanity, forgiveness, and redemption are real, and that one selfless act can echo far beyond the moment it is given. In the end, the legacy they left was not seen by all, but it was felt by many, and that perhaps was enough.